Hey there, Scooby fans. Welcome to part 3 of my Gothic Horror of Scooby-Doo. In part 1, I discussed what Gothic Horror was, and I just touched upon what makes that spooky castle or mansion so scary in Scooby-Doo. In part 2, I looked at qualities that make a villain scary or interesting, and today I'm going to cover my final two concepts or pillars or tropes of Gothic Horror, which are bad weather and inheritance. So the concept of bad weather in Gothic horror is one of the first things that often spring to people's mind when they think of Gothic literature or movies. After all, when we think of like Dracula or vampire movies or werewolf movies and books, how often do we think of like a thick rolling fog? And we think of this fog because it makes it just easier for the vampire or werewolf or whatever else to sneak up on us, right? And then where would Frankenstein be without that bolt of lightning? Would Frankenstein even be alive? But there's a bit more to bad weather than what I'm discussing right now. There's a running gag in the Peanuts cartoon strip where Snoopy always starts every novel off with, "It was a dark and stormy night." And there's a reason for it. Weather instantly sets the mood. All of us can relate to being afraid at one point for our lives from horrible weather. Even if you aren't afraid, your senses are certainly heightened. There's a huge difference between driving your car down a road on a sunny day versus driving during an ice storm when tree branches are crashing down all around you and your car is one breath away from crashing into that transport truck that is sliding in your direction. Furthermore, very few of us are likely to go frolicking in the woods when the fog is thick and the sun is going down. And if we are caught out in the forest at night, we are certainly bound to get lost or put ourselves into danger, as it is so easy to walk off a cliff or into a den of angry raccoons with rabies. Thus, in both film and literature, when we read or visually see bad weather, we are instantly put on edge and drawn further into that world. Bad weather also heightens battle scenes or scenes of great conflict. We are on the edge of our seats with the climax of The Shining, where Jack Torrance is chasing his son through that garden maze during a blizzard. We can also look at bad weather as a warning from God. In Frankenstein, for example, lightning could be seen as God's way of warning Victor Frankenstein not to proceed, not to revive the already dead. In Scooby-Doo, the stormy weather could also be seen as a warning from above not to enter that haunted castle, insane asylum, or run-down mansion. Many of those classic Scooby-Doo episodes we love, particularly the Scooby-Doo show, such as Harum Scarum Sanitarium, the Headless Horseman of Halloween, Vampire Bats and Scaredy Cats, and the Creepy Tangle and Bermuda Triangle, all feature bad weather that sets us on edge for the entire running time of that episode. Now, I don't know how to segue into my next pillar of Gothic horror, so I'm momentarily going to put up my tier of cereals. This is how I view cereal. Honey Nut Cheerios, amazing. Honey Bunches of Oats, also awesome. I love both these cereals. Second on the list, Frosted Flakes and Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries. Frosted Flakes, it kind of makes my pee smell funny, and Captain Crunch, of course, is notorious for ripping up your mouth. And then for Saturday mornings only, so this is something I'd only want like a bowl of once a week. You might have Cookie Crisp, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Rice Krispies. I like Rice Krispies a lot, but I don't love it. Like, I'll eat it probably every day, but it's something I only want like once a week. Regular Captain Crunch and Pops. Pops I might actually put up a little bit higher. I really do like Pops a lot. But then again, I couldn't eat it like every day for a year like I do the other ones mentioned above. And the next tier, like I wouldn't turn down a bowl of Raisin Bran. It's not bad. Same with Cheerios. Fruit Loops, I can enjoy in small doses. Lucky Charms, similarly. Cocoa Pebbles, Cocoa Puffs, Fruity Pebbles, Trix. Like I wouldn't turn down a bowl. Mini Wheats, they're okay. And Reese's Puffs, they're pretty good. And then yeah, the bottom ones, they're not bad either. I'll eat them. But, you know, I consider these more healthier alternatives to cereal, even though they're probably not, like Life and Rice Chex and Shredded Wheat and Corn Flakes and Special K and Crispix and Wheaties. They're not bad. Like, there's probably something, if I'm trying to eat a little bit healthier, I'll buy these instead of these sugary cereals.
We now rejoin our program already in progress.
The final pillar of Gothic horror that I wanted to discuss, and I should mention there's other aspects or tropes or themes of Gothic horror. I'm just covering 5 basic ones, 5 of the most common ones, and the 5 that frankly just kind of interest me the most. But the final concept that I'm going to talk about today is the concept of inheritance. And inheritance is one of my favorite features of Gothic horror because I feel it's not rarely, or it's just not talked about all that often, but it's one of the most powerful and interesting Gothic horror pillars you can have. So at its core, inheritance is exactly what you think it is. A younger generation is gifted something by an older generation. But with Gothic horror, this is rarely money or like golden treasure or puppy dogs or some sort of classic sports car. Nope, it is often something like a young couple inheriting a haunted house that's full of creepy ghosts. We've seen this concept of inheritance before in dozens of Scooby-Doo episodes, such as the Chinese kooky fortune caper, vampire bats and scaredy cats to switch a witch, and the Highland fling with a monstrous thing. In Gothic horror, usually the haunting has occurred due to some sort of sin, such as a murder or some other sort of tragic event, and the children or grandchildren have inherited the problems. For example, in the film A Nightmare on Elm Street, it's the children's parents who have killed Freddy Krueger when he was alive, and 10 years later or 20 years later, he has come back to haunt the children's dreams. What a Shocking Ghost and the Ghost That Sacked a Quarterback are examples in Scooby-Doo where ghosts have come back to haunt the entire town due to a wrong. Where I find the idea of inheritance most interesting and powerful is with its concept of nature versus nurture, that classic debate. For example, in real life, inheritance can be a metaphor for diseases or traits that reoccur in the family line. If one of your parents had cancer, chances are you are at higher risk for that specific cancer. This would be the genetic aspect and would be the nature part of the equation. For nurture, it might be the cycle of abuse we see passed on from generation to generation. If you are raised in an abusive family, it is more likely that you will become an abuser. Now, I'm not saying you will get cancer or become an abuser if someone in your family was abusive or someone had cancer. I'm just saying the chances are a little more higher than if they didn't. At least that is how we generally see it as. We can see this in The Shining, where it's hinted at that Jack Torrance once hit his child. Jack is also a recovering alcoholic. And one of the themes is, will Jack pass these traits of alcoholism and abuse onto his son, whether it be through genetics or the environment? And this is something that is dealt with in Gothic horror, particularly literature and sometimes film. A recent movie I watched called Black Phone deals with the concepts of abuse, and if you watch it carefully, you can make connections between the changing masks of the villain and the masks of the abuse other people wear within that film. It's very subtle, but once you recognize it, it brings a lot more power to that film. An even better movie that showcases the concept of inheritance and the nature versus nurture aspect would be Hereditary. This movie, though, it really messed me up. For like 3 days, I just walked around and had the bleakest outlook on life. So I don't necessarily recommend it, but man, if you wanna check out the power of inheritance, check out this film. Anyway, that wraps up part 3 of my Gothic horror intro. And in October, I will put out the final part, which is where I will break down some of my favorite episodes of Scooby-Doo, and I will highlight all of the Gothic features we've talked about, and maybe some additional ones that I have not talked about just yet. Anyway, until then, stay spooky.